All right, Vortex Nation coming in hot today with the comment of the week. Spencer Tidd writes in at Vortex Nation, is it possible that we finally find out why there's a framed picture of Jason Alexander in the podcast studio? Can't wait to find out at last. Now, this is in regards to our somewhat MTV Cribs style studio tour we did the other day. And the unfortunate thing is the fast follow to Spencer's comment is from he himself, and he says, disappointed. Frowny face. Spencer, I am right there with you. I've been asking Jim and Ryan why this showed up in the podcast studio. They refused to tell me as well. You might have been able to tell. I kind of prodded Jim there a little bit. He didn't really reveal too much. If I was to speculate, I think it's because they feel, and I'd say unfounded, that I may have some sort of Costanza-like tendencies. That's my personal hypothesis. I tell you what, though, I'm going to poke and prod those guys a little bit more and see if we can find out the answer for you and me at last. But hopefully we can turn that frown upside down because we've selected your comment as the comment of the week. Spencer, you're going to get yourself one of these super sweet Vortex Nation podcast hoodies. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it right now. I'm wearing it, and you're going to be wearing one too. Let's start the show.
The more variables of input we can enter, the more accurate that firing solution is going to be. More data points. So if I was to do a couple things to quote unquote accurize my rifle, the places I would start would be that trigger and that barrel.
Okay.
Probably trigger first, then barrel.
What is up, everybody? Jim to my right. We have Justin, one of our instructors down at Vortex Edge with us right now. Guys, it's been a while since we've just had like a good old-fashioned long-range rap session.
I guess it has been, hasn't it?
We've done a lot of long-range podcasts. We did that series very early on in the Vortex Nation podcast.
I think before we even really had thumbnails on YouTube.
We didn't do the podcast for YouTube then.
Right, yeah.
There was just no video recording.
Yeah.
And then you were like, we should video it. And I'm like,
who is going to watch a podcast?
And then some people did.
It's probably the most popular area of viewing,
Jim, that was
and listening that we have.
That was a good call on your part. That was you were an innovator at the time.
I mean, let's be honest. I think Joe Rogan's been videoing his podcast far longer than we have, and many others.
Maybe that's where we got the idea.
Could have been.
His podcast does pretty well.
Could have been chicken.
Could have been chicken. We just watched an oldie but a goodie when it comes to YouTube videos. It's not a podcast video, but...
That is, yeah. Yeah, YouTube search, It All Went to Hades. That's a great video. One of the favorites around the office.
A lot going on. Excellent reporting. Justin, what's going on, dude?
Just staying busy. Summer's upon us and running long-range courses.
Well, good. Then you should be brushed up on what we're going to cover today.
Yeah.
Justin's always brushed up, man. That guy is always, he's always figuring something.
Constant state of brush.
A constant state of moderate to severe paranoia about whether or not he knows enough about long-range shooting to be teaching it.
And the more I know, it seems like the less I do.
He says that with a crazed look in his eye.
You got that crazy look in your eye, Harry. Justin, I think you were, a couple weeks ago, I was getting a rifle set up to go bear hunting, and I wanted it to be, I always like to be able to extend my effective range if needed. But I think we were talking about that. I said, I used to plug my numbers into a ballistic calculator, probably using the box posted velocity. Actually, no, I would do more than that because I'd use the box posted velocity. Then I would go to the range, validate, tweak my velocity.
Okay.
And then I'd get a dope chart, and then I'd tape it to my stock, and I'd go shoot critters. Heck, I killed a mule deer at 650 yards that way one time.
Yeah.
Now I would never even think of doing such a thing.
Why is that?
Because we have like even more ballistic calculators and technology and like easy to set up chronographs to get a good velocity. We got
reliable.
We got Razor GBs that are giving me a customized ballistic solution to where I'm at that very point in time.
Well, and just the GB app, which is like...
Yeah, and that's nice too.
I mean, ballistics calculators have come a long way because now they do so much more than just spit out a number.
But I think and I guess at the time when that was kind of like my, the way I was...
Your process?
My process. It was probably actually pretty advanced compared to what a lot of people, comparatively were doing. But now it's just like, oh my gosh, child's play. Do you think or no? Am I wrong?
I mean, it worked. It worked.
I think
so what the stuff I'm doing now is working better.
I bet it does. But I think this goes back to me. For me, this goes back to kind of like what we did with our long range 1001, 1002, 1003, and stuff like that. And, what you're talking about, what you were doing was some kind of maybe 1001 level stuff.
Yeah.
We call it 1001, because it's like 1,000 yards and long range and all that stuff. So
it's a long range play on words, Justin. We'll explain later.
Thanks, Jay. But there's so many folks out there now who want to shoot long range, think it's really awesome. The firearms that we have available to us right now, there's a custom gun sitting on the table as we speak, but Justin was even talking about, he's like, I could bring up one of the many Ruger RPRs that we use in class, but they're not that sexy, but they're extremely consistent and available easily. Ammo. We talked about all these things, so many advancements. There's so much.
We did a podcast on the RPR one time.
Yeah, there's like a game of pickup sticks in terms of all of the things that are available to someone to get into long range shooting, and there's a lot more sticks on the ground. But for someone who's new to it, still, it's a bit of a jumbled mess, and you're trying to figure out which one you're supposed to pick up first and how to not disturb one of the other ones. That's kind of how I think about it. So even what you were describing, where you're like, oh yeah, I'd use a box posted velocity and validate, and then stick a thing on the side of my stock. There's a lot of people who are still like, whoa, wait, what?
Sure.
You mean you could even... You're talking about taping a distance on your stock that's for a 700-yard shot. You can even shoot 700 yards? What's going on there, So I don't think... all I'm getting at is I wouldn't poo-hoo it.
No, I will say my dope charts that I would tape to my stock, I think were a little bit next level because I would print it off. You know how I love to print things, Jim.
Yes.
But we have a laminator here, too. So then I would print it, cut it, laminate it, and then tape it to my stock using clear tape.
Yeah.
And then you got yourself a pretty darn waterproof dope chart on your stock.
The laminator was a business purchase for the graphic design team and, basically folks that are into creating unique things, printing them out, and then wanting to laminate them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they've sometimes been wondering, where did all the laminate
Yeah, they're going to need more supplies.
Yeah.
No, I never did. Well, I believe in redundancy. So yeah, maybe I'd have one in my taped to my stock. Maybe I'd have one in the top lid of my pack. Maybe I'd shove one in my binar harness. We don't know.
A lot of that too can be memorization. For example, if you are hunting and you're kind of sticking to that 500 and in, all of that data, regardless of the time of year, like atmospherics and things like that, is going to change pretty minimally, depending on your size of target too. So for example, if you were to go out now when it's 75 degrees out, get all your data, and then you go hunting this fall here in Wisconsin when it's maybe 30 degrees, you're still going to be pretty darn close.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think some of these things do. The more you do, the more you fine tune things, the more technology you use to put together that long range puzzle. Some of those things do become more important, I guess, the further you get out.
Well, absolutely. That's not gonna it's not gonna really play ball when you're talking 9,000 yards. So
900 to 1,000 yards, not 9. Well, it would really come into play at 9,000 yards.
Yeah, I don't know if that record's been touched yet. I think the furthest we're at is 7,700 somewhere around there. So
actually, you're right. That is what it is.
7,700.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at right now.
Do you know what cartridge they used? Probably 300 Wisdom.
Yeah, I was going to say. I actually wondered if you knew and you were wanting us to say it.
Justin, let's talk. So we're talking long range here. Maybe if you can, just because I find it interesting, maybe talk a little bit about your background and how you got into long range shooting, and then we'll kind of get into some of the nuts and bolts of things here.
Yeah. So before I wound up here at Vortex, I spent about 10 years or so in the military, 8 of which were in like special operations, and I kind of ended my time in the military as a Special Forces sniper instructor with 10 Special Forces Group out in Colorado.
That's a pretty
That's a strong credential.
notable, cred.
At the same time, though,
Credit
when
sheet.
we first started, like the technology we were using, it's kind of advanced since then. We did have ballistic calculators, but it was like a brick, right? No weather. We had to manually enter, all the weather, atmospherics, and things like that. So it's progressed quite a ways. I mean, when we first started, we didn't even have Kestrels. We were still using logbooks and things like that. So the way I kind of approach long-range shooting, it's not exactly the same as it was, 15 years ago. And 5 years from now, it's probably going to be different entirely as well. So just kind of stay with it.
That's, I mean, like try to, right? You know, and I think that's, and Jim was speaking to that earlier, to your credit. You're definitely not one of those guys that's like, this, I was doing this in a professional capacity, and it's like almost like time stops, and you're like, and that's how you do it.
Yeah. So, Justin, I have a question. It's related to long range shooting, but it's also kind of related to just your background. You hear somebody say that they did sniper stuff in the military, right? Yeah, all the way up to sniper instructor at Special Forces, stuff like that. Let me see, I'm trying to like draw the parallel as to why this is a question that pops into my head. And I guess it's probably a car reference as usual. So I've met some race car drivers, for example, and you start asking about their car because you're a car guy and you think that they're going to be like super obsessed with cars because they're a race car driver, obviously.
Yeah.
And then you realize they actually don't really care that much. They just they're just a race car driver. Like the car is just a means.
Driving, they would tell you about driving.
Yeah, the car is a means to do what they love to do, And even I think we talked to Mike, who is doing rodeo, the cowboy Mike.
Oh yeah,
he's doing rodeo, and he said that you have guys who don't grow up as cowboys, and they decide they want to get into rodeo, and then they get into it because for whatever reasons, it's like an adrenaline thing, or it's like about the most extreme thing.
Like a bull rider never riding a horse.
Yeah, right. So, like, are all snipers super into guns and long range shooting, or like there's other facets to being a sniper too? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I don't know why, but the word sniper just kind of makes me cringe. I don't know why, it just kind of does.
I think it kind of gets used improperly. A lot,
I can say
or
that.
people have in their mind an image of like
a sniper and then
a desperado military cowboy out on their own, just kind of like mopping up whatever they want.
And in my perceptions, well, it's not that sexy.
Right.
But
they're just always shooting, and they're just always zerping.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, kind of to your point. So for example, I like long range shooting. I like guns, but if I was to build my own precision like long range rifle, it would probably end up terribly.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, case in point.
Weren't you the weapons guy?
Yes. So if it did break, I was supposed to be the subject matter expert.
It's better that comes out now than in the moment when you're trying to fix the...
I used a hammer a lot. Yeah, we won't talk about that.
Okay.
But
you obviously, anyway, I just, because, you're into long range shooting now, that kind of stuck. I didn't know if it was kind of like every guy who gets out of serving and they were in a sniper role, if like every single one of them you can expect to be just like carrying on and always trying to like reach this pinnacle of accuracy and precision and long range. And
I have an old teammate who went to the schoolhouse with me. We both went to level 1, and we both got out of the military, and I don't think he's touched a gun since he's gotten out.
Interesting.
Do you know if he had an interest before he went in, and did he just like burn
he
out
did.
on
I mean,
it? Or?
He hunted and things like that. Did a little bit of kind of recreational shooting, a little bit of competition shooting. Never got super serious about it, but once he got out, he I believe he lives in Montana now, and he's kind of like a hermit.
Okay.
Right on, man.
So, yeah.
So it's just,
That was-
I guess the
Yeah.
answer, like we like to say around here, Jim, it depends.
It depends. That
Yeah.
was a curiosity I
Yeah.
had to itch.
Yeah. So
Going back to, my earlier example of the bear hunt, like I probably could have done, I guess, my old method. But dude, my confidence level was just so through the roof with like, using the GeoBallistics app and then coupling with the Razor GB analysis. Just sounds like it's like a product advertisement. It's not. It is, but it isn't, because I was just like, dude, this is money. Like I knew I had good data. I think actually. So one of my first bullet point here is building a ballistics profile, good data in, good data out. I knew I had good data in, good data out. Like to me, what might change would be the atmospherics, and boom.
good to go.
Calibrate the compass when I got there. I'm set there, and then good to go. And we ended up killing 2 bears in the same night at about the same, like not crazy far, right? But both shots went exactly where they were supposed to go at 350 yards, and I did dial the turret, and off we went. So we ended up using my rifle for both bears. I shot the one, and then and we should actually do a podcast on them, but and then we're like, okay, cool. He's hit hard. He went down in there. He got in this super thick stuff, classic, and didn't look like he came out. And we're just kind of waiting on that. And then another bear started working its way up the canyon, and my buddy was like, "Hey, can I borrow your gun?" And so we got that too. I was like, okay. We just went from 0 to like 9,000. But like I said, my confidence level was just like, let's do this. Get to a good spot, get in a good position, shoot, and off we go. So
Well, I feel like the firing solution with today's ballistic software is a little bit more accurate just because of those variables we do input. There's a lot more variables that kind of go into it. We're kind of refining that firing solution, kind of gathering a little bit more data when it comes to atmospherics and things like that, kind of pinning it down, and then, like you said, increasing your capability because we can be a little bit more refined with that firing solution, instead of just having like generic data, right, and then possibly having to validate that if we have the opportunity to. But yeah, it's come a long way, so we can be a lot more precise nowadays.
Well, and what I like about some of this, I guess I'll keep using the same example. What I may have had to do previously would be like, okay, well now I need to re-input my data, create another dope chart, because before I was hunting at sea level, well now I'm going to be at 8,000 feet.
Yep.
Before I was doing whatever, let's say an early season, bear hunt, let's say in the summer. Well, temps are going to be different. Well, now I'm doing like, a late season hunt.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
it's almost like I have like this like constantly like updating dope chart just with me all the time.
Well, you said kind of like,
That is nice.
crap in, crap out type of thing. Like we're not rounding anymore. We're not fudging it. We're not doing Kentucky windage. We're trying to hit like a pretty precise target or small target at distance. So when we start stacking those tolerances, like you said, you're going to get crap, right? So being as refined as possible and then updating all of those atmospherics can go along with that. So
Everything is always about trying to eliminate as many inconsistencies and as many variables as possible, because when you start talking about long range, which I don't even know if we've ever officially like defined what long range is. There's this number of 1,000 yards that's very attainable. But maybe since it's the point that you get to 4 digits, everybody thinks that like, well, that's where long range starts. It could very well be considered to start sooner or even much sooner. Certainly we talked to 22 long range guys, and their long range is significantly different than your centerfire guys. But removing variables and inconsistencies and guesses as much as possible and being as precise really makes a huge difference. Like if we're in this room that's like, 40 feet long, and I set off to go try and walk towards a target that we had on the wall, and I was off by 1 degree, I'm still going to get within arm's reach of the target by the time I reach the end of the hallway or the room. But if I wanted to have a target on the wall in California and I was off by 1 degree walking from Wisconsin, I might end up in Mexico or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's going to be
We haven't done the
screwed
math.
up.
Yeah.
We haven't done the math, but
Plug it into the GB, Jim, and then
we'll
let's
just
find out.
Yeah, I wonder what my BC is.
I have a BC, Jim.
Yeah, I've got an O-Jive mark. Can you BC me?
I just hope we can enlist the power of editing at some point here.
But kind of to your
definitely a
point,
reference to
long range is
parents.
pretty arbitrary, kind of in the eye of the beholder. Nothing to take away from some of those extreme long range shooters, right? What they do is pretty precise. You have to be in order to kind of reach those distances. And people are probably going to hate me for this, but at some point in time, it becomes like a hat trick, in my opinion. Right. So, for example, if you shoot 30 rounds and on that 31st round you hit the target, you high five, is that precision, or is it?
I think it depends.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends. Like, if you're on a basketball court and there's a guy out there who's just like, some super unathletic looking dude, and he's just granny shotting like full court shots, and one goes in after like 150 tries. You're like, that was extremely rare.
But it was
great
awesome.
job, but like complete luck. But if there's like, some professional basketball player out there and they actually know like, okay, my first shot was short, so like I know I'm going to put this much extra little oomph on it. It becomes more impressive when they do hit it because they actually sort of knew what they were doing to make the adjustments to then get there.
Absolutely.
But I do know what you mean, where it's like, when you hear about these instances of, okay, you hit a target a gazillion yards away. It took 60 rounds.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. I mean, it was still really far away.
But, and at the same time, say that, like, I don't know, 3,000-yard shot or 2,500-yard shot. Now they're like, okay, well, let's back it down into where you live, Justin, and now let me shoot this 1,200-yard target. And, like, first round impacts every time, right? So I think pushing that distance just kind of increases their capability, when they do back it off a little bit. So...
Oh yeah, if you're used to shooting at 7,000 yards, and somebody goes, "Can you hit that 1,000 yards away?" They're like, "Oh, hold on, let me zoom out." It's like when you put something in front of your parents as a kid, and they always got to go like this. But
like, I only have 1 mil of deflection with this wind versus 20. So.
That makes a big difference. We're talking, and I want to get back into the data points that a person's going to want to enter into a ballistics calculator. But you talked about good data and good data. Like, it's like good rifle, and I think we're going to get to some shooting related things. That, like the human element. But like, you do need a rifle that is shooting with a high degree of precision and accuracy.
Absolutely. The way I break it down when it comes to the shooting system, I break it down to 4 components: the gun, the ammo, the optic, and the shooter.
Okay.
So back to your point when you were talking about the race car drivers, right? You could give the world's best rally car driver like a Yugo. He's probably going to drive the shit out of that Yugo, but not to his greatest capability, right? Conversely, you get that rally car in front of like a 15-year-old kid with a learner's permit, he can only do so much.
Yeah.
Right? Now you take some other components of that car, right? Maybe swap the engine out, tires, like crappy tires. All right. Now we're like, okay, well, now I'm kind of doing this on their, track versus what I could be doing. So those 4 components are kind of like the main ones. And then a lot of different variables kind of go into that, right? Such as ammunition, like match ammunition, PC, SDs, extreme spread, all of that stuff. But that's kind of like how I break it down, I guess, on the surface. So,
yeah. And so let's say a person there, I've got either a load that I've developed or a factory load, which that dives into a question that I'll have down the road here as well. But like, the gun is shooting well. I'm getting a nice, we'll say, sub MOA group at 100 yards. It's interesting. We always, like, when we talk about group size, we always say sub MOA. But most long, at least, okay, this is my observation, what I see. Like, be like, oh yeah, I shot, this gun shoots sub MOA. But then most long range folks shoot mils, it seems. Like, is there like a sub
mil?
It would
that would be like 3 points.
Good.
Yeah, it'd be. I don't think it'd be as impressive. That'd be like 3.6 inches.
Yeah. Right. And nobody wants to say, I shoot sub 3/8 mil.
Right.
Sub 0.4. It
just
doesn't roll off the tongue.
Yeah.
It's all about,
which
you know
is
what?
Kind of odd.
You know what it is in life, Mark? If you have a term and it doesn't roll off the tongue, no one will ever use it.
You should start it sub mil.
Dude, all my guns shoot sub mil. So good.
I gotta, yeah. Hey, There's a couple of old guns shooting a party mix of hunting ammo that show up at Hunter Sight In every year that are shooting sub
Yeah,
mil.
that's good. You're shooting sub mil. That's when I get a gun and I'm just like, ugh, frustrating that it's not shooting that good. Then I'm just gonna transition to like it's sub mil.
I would love,
and then
to
it's
see
fine. Then it's fine again.
Really big marketing campaign on a brand new firearm, and it's like guaranteed sub mil accuracy, and everyone's like, I need that.
I want that. Mils are the best.
Yeah.
All right.
What were we talking about, though?
I think we're something in relation. I want to go into ballistics calculators a little bit and just like the, kind of, and we're getting this a little bit more on the 101 side, but like what data points or variables is a person going to want to account for to make sure that they're getting a good ballistics profile?
A lot. Right? The more variables of input we can enter, all right, the more accurate that firing solution is going to be. More data points. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we're going for.
Everyone you say, we're going to real quick, as we go through the list, I want to make sure that we mention where you can find it.
Okay.
So like because we'll rattle off these lists sometimes, and I think sometimes it's like, well, that's great, thanks for the list, guys, but like, how do I find that? So like, for example, let's start.
There may be some I'm going to miss in here, right? Because there's quite a few. Let's just start with the gun since we have this 6 arc in front of us. So let's kind of go over the gun. All right. So we need to know what gun we're shooting. So it would be the caliber, right? So
it's pretty easy.
Yeah. So what is 6.5 arc caliber?
Is there a 6.5 arc mark? Or
six arc.
Yeah.
6.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Yep. Sorry.
We're getting.
I was looking at that 6.5 Creedmoor box earlier. Got a little.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, we are surrounded by many different boxes.
Okay. So the 6 arc. So we need the caliber, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which would be
6 millimeter.
There we go. Can we have? We need to know the diameter in inches.
That's 243, right?
Is it?
Yeah, a 243 is a 6 millimeter.
All right, so we have
Jeez, I was like,
all right.
I know I sound like an idiot a lot on the podcast, but I didn't want to just sound like a. Usually, I'm semi-aware of it.
So we need to know the diameter of that bullet. Okay, so that's one. Now we need to know the. Okay, so we'll get into that in a little bit. So speaking of the bullet, we need to know the weight of that bullet.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what are you shooting for your 6 arc?
I'm between 108s and 103s.
All right, so we've got 108s, so we have that. A couple other things we can do with ballistic software. Depending on the ballistic software, they may have a bullet library you can choose from. I believe GB has a pretty extensive one.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can enter in all that other information, which you could find on, say, I saw a box of Hornady, for example. A lot of this information is printed right on the box.
Yeah, It does make it nice when you have a bullet library, because you can go through and just look at your box and it says, it'll say Hornady black, loaded with a 108 grain ELDX or whatever it is. Yeah. And then you can just pop that in and it already knows the information from the library on the weight, which is that grain terminology that we used. And then it'll know the BC, ballistic coefficient of the bullet and all that.
It auto-populates kind of some of the stuff that you might have to.
Yep.
If you didn't just pick you would just have to manually input those.
Also, if there's ever a bullet that you find or you search for and it's not in the bullet library on GB, then you just give us a call and we'll make sure that we add it promptly.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good tip.
There's quite a few in there.
There are. We added a ton.
Yeah. Also, like you were talking about earlier, Mark, we can get the generic muzzle velocity, right? That's a big one, all right? That cannot really be fudged, all right? Makes a big difference. So that's basically what we need for the ammunition, okay? A lot of people are like, what about extreme spread SDs? Doesn't matter for ballistic software, right? We can only give that ballistic software one muzzle velocity. So that kind of covers ammunition. Let's talk about the gun. All right, we kind of got a little off tangent there. So we need to know height over bore, right? Which would be basically from the center of that bore, so like the firing pin, if you will, to the center of like the windage turret. All right, that's going to be kind of like the center of your optic there. So or reticle, because that's where and elevation turret, right? So that's kind of where we're kind of going for. Center of that optic. So we need to know height over bore due to that angular deviation. And then also your twist rate. So this would be, what's this one?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I wonder if it says printed on the side. No, this is nice. One of those pretty clean barrels.
Yeah.
Doesn't have anything
shiny.
I can't remember off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
A lot of ballistic software programs out there will not ask for rifle twist. you can still get elevation at distance without rifle twist.
Okay.
Rifle twist is really going to come into play when we talk about secondary effects and things like that.
Okay.
So aerodynamic jump, crosswind jump, if you will, or spin drift, things like that are going to, kind of come into play with that. So that's why some ballistic software programs do not ask for rifle twist.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And that twist number, that's going to be that number that oftentimes is printed on the barrel,
Yeah.
or at least, you can get it from the manufacturer's website. It's going to be, 1 in 10, 1 in 8, 1 in 7, whatever it turns out to be.
Yep.
A lot of these, it seems like these, quotation mark, higher speed, modern, high BC, optimally designed cartridges, heavy for caliber bullet type offerings have a higher twist rate than what we've seen, historically in the past.
Higher twist rate, lower numerically. Because
Correct.
So I know what you're saying.
So
they're
a
tighter
1 in
twisted.
Yes, like a 1 in 8 is going to be a higher twist rate than a 1 in 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or tighter.
For every 8 inches, you get
yeah.
1 revolution versus every 10 inches, you get 1 revolution.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then some people are like, okay, what about barrel length and things like that? Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Right. It doesn't really, because barrel length does have correlation to muzzle velocity in the end sometimes.
absolutely.
Sometimes it can help in terms of giving you more muzzle velocity.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can hurt in terms of giving you less. But yeah, as long as you know ultimately what the muzzle velocity is at the end, it doesn't matter what length barrel it came out of.
Yeah,
really,
absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of covers, I believe, ammunition, the gun. Let's see what else we got. The optic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to know if we are shooting in that mil or that MOA, or some optics. It's been a while since I've seen them, where on the turrets it says 1 click equals a 1/4 of an inch.
Oh, wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can generally assume.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, those are the old school. I mean, that's the one where you're using like a quarter to turn the
Yeah. So
to turn the turret.
not really made for dialing.
No, that's from the days of if you get a good 0, you like lock everything down and never move it ever again.
Nobody ever touches that.
That's that mil guarantee right there. And I believe that's kind of on the surface, those variables of input you need to enter, some of your constants, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, that stuff, like what about environmental factors?
So, yes. All right. So everything we just kind of covered, again, distance to the target, size of the target dependent, can get you pretty close, right? It's better than just kind of, just holding about this far above that target.
Just slinging.
Just throwing lead. So atmospheric conditions do come into play. And then people are like, okay, why does it matter? Things like that. Well, same reason we pick like a heavy barrel, right? Like a heavy contour barrel because we want more rigidity, all right? Mm-hmm. When metal heats up, those molecules separate. Same thing with the atmosphere, all right? In really hot days, all right, those molecules, they kind of separate. So the air, all right, becomes quote unquote less dense, so there's less drag on the bullet. So, all right, on hot days, we need less elevation to get there. All right, so we need to kind of factor that in. Same thing with, opposite holds true for cold days. All right, elevation, same kind of concept, right? So we need to kind of factor that in as well. So atmospheric conditions, they do come into play. They're going to have drag, less drag, more drag on that projectile.
I missed a mule deer. I mean, just low. I mean, my left-right was perfect one day, and I got to thinking, this is many years ago, so I'd have been doing, my old school methods, and this might be a good example of where it could have. No, it could have just been me, right? But it could be also where having not that specific of data bit me, because it was like, I think it was, 0 degrees, sub freezing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, like, we were filming, just watch the trees go, and like split the wickets between his legs. Like, it was just like, what is going on there? Like I said, that could have been me, but also I'm wondering, like, did I not dial enough because what I had as, my generated dope card wasn't accounting for the fact that it was a lot colder that day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and that is your environmentals, and what the bullet has to fly through is everything. Because, if you could shoot in a gravityless vacuum, then none of this stuff would even matter. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So everything that the bullet flies through is going to be have an impact on what happens. So getting things like knowing your elevation, knowing your what the temperature is. And I mean, a lot of these things ultimately wind up wrapping up into something you can usually find on your weather station of some sort, which is, isn't it density altitude, which
density
kind of combines a few things?
So talking to some of the individuals behind GB, right? On the GB app in particular, we can only use like muzzle velocity, temp, and things like that. Temperature, humidity, pressure, or we can use density altitude. So for example, the reason we can only use one or the other is because density altitude, say you have, say, 2,500 feet density altitude, right? Well, it could be because maybe the pressure and the temperature, all right, we can get, if we change the temperature and pressure, we can get the same density altitude number, but those two numbers over here would fluctuate. So that's why we can only use one or the other. So if people are like, yep, okay, so just be very cognizant of that. But again, same kind of concepts, right? So density altitude would be, in layman's terms, I guess a very simple way to think about it is what that projectile thinks the conditions are. So for example, if you were like a pilot, right, you're not going to be using like, I guess above, sea level, right, for elevation, like you would like when you measure a mountain. You would be using density altitude. So what that plane thinks it's flying at.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because based on the conditions, you could be, it could just be a day where, for whatever reason, the air is notably more dense than otherwise it is, just because of whatever it is, temperature, humidity, all these things that factor in. So you can either plug those in individually, and then the app is going to kind of do its own math behind the scenes by taking all those individual bits, or you can give it density altitude, which is
all those numbers combined.
Yeah.
Interesting.
In a very way that we can't describe.
Yeah.
At least I can't.
I'm not that.
I'm not a DA expert.
What I want
etymology.
Etymology.
DA.
You're gonna have to talk to the DA.
But a lot of equipment that can kind of come into play. We got weather meters, ballistic calculators, chronographs, right? So all those tools of the trade, so to speak, are going to kind of help us get that refined firing solution.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So,
what features in a long range rifle? Like I think we have a really nice example here in
thanks, Mark.
Jim, which actually I'm kind of shocked that you did something in what I would consider today's little modern darling of a long range cartridge. You generally don't like to just hop on a trend, Jim. And this is a 6 arc, which I think is
not a 6.5.
Everybody needs one gun that just works, and usually that's in whatever's popular.
So some of the things we look for in a long-range precision rifle, or I do, there's going to be a lot of kind of personal preference. Stock versus chassis. Really don't care. Whatever works for you. Jim, you chose a chassis.
I did, but a fairly stocky chassis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stockish chassis.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I would...
It's hidden.
A hybrid.
Yeah.
It's hidden. It's disguised as somewhat of a stock until you start adjusting the cheek piece and you start adding the Arca rail and things
the weights.
Like that. But yeah, it doesn't. There are some chassis that look like scaffolding.
Right.
And it looks like something that you would find in an architectural studio as like an art piece, and then they attach it to a gun. This is a little bit less.
They're nice. A lot of adjustability. A lot of places to add your weights, your bipods. You have that arc on there. But with my chassis, I feel like there's 27 little different bolts, screws, nuts.
Oh man.
I got to make sure I got it tightened down. So it's nice, but 27 different failure points. So whether it's a stock or a chassis, what we want to look for is adjustability, right? Going back to your race car, right? You want to, as soon as you get into a vehicle, you want to adjust it so you can drive it to your greatest capability, right? The mirrors, the seats, etc. Same thing with a rifle. We want to adjust it for us as an individual. So we're looking for a couple different things. Maybe adjustable comb height, adjustable length of pull. With this particular one, which I really like, is you can adjust that butt pad up or down.
Oh yeah,
as well.
Cool.
So I do like that. But that's kind of what we're looking for, is the adjustability. And
that's just making you fit. You set up the rifle. The rifle's, in some ways, there's going to be parts of the rifle that are static. But then you're taking some of those components that you can adjust and fitting.
Yep.
Like, for example, depending on who got behind this gun with the optic set up as is, a big thing is getting your eye behind the optic correctly. There are some people with their facial structure and, skeletal structure where their eyes are, they wouldn't need to raise the cheek piece that I have or the comb height up maybe at all or nearly as much as I have. But one of the things that I have here is the scope mounted in 2-piece rings on top of Picatinny rail. And, as much as maybe for my comfort in getting behind the gun, if I didn't have an adjustable cheek piece, I would like it lower. Because I do have that adjustable comb height, I can make it higher, and then I can just make my eye meet the scope where it's at. I don't have to induce something I hear the guys say at Vortex Edge a lot, muscle tension, which can lead to muscle fatigue while shooting, which can then lead to all sorts of inaccuracies downrange. But it's just when I go prone or seated or whatever it is behind the gun, I am completely relaxed, and that is what you need. If I gave this gun to Mark, chances are he would make a couple of tweaks because, if it's set up for me, it's
set up for you.
Yeah. It's like getting into someone else's car. Usually the first thing is you're like, oh, these mirrors are weird. Or this person likes likes to be a low rider.
But yeah, we need that adjustable comb height. Some people are like, okay, why is that important? Because I'm always going to mount that optic as low to the bore as possible. That's kind of like an old myth we used to hear, right? Mount that optic as low to that gun as possible because back then we never really had, or depending on your setup, we never really had that adjustable comb height. But we talked about that 7,700 yard shot. I promise you, that optic wasn't anywhere close, all right, to that bore. But they could account for that because they had a really, really high comb height.
Yeah, that is a thing that became a bit of a misnomer where people thought the lower an optic was to the bore, the more accurate it was.
Yeah.
When in fact that actually has nothing to do with anything. It's just people trying to get comfortable.
Yeah. Well, and so that's one thing, and I think we were talking about this exact thing in a previous podcast. Maybe it was even the three of us. I don't know. But I do wonder if by doing that, people were just shooting their rifles better because, when that kind of came to be whatever the common thought, you're thinking, mostly sporter style stocks, so if your cheek is going to be lower. So it was almost like optimizing the scope height for the rifle style, possibly resulting in better accuracy because you have a better cheek weld and things like that. Yep. But it wasn't necessarily like a, I guess it's like a mechanical. I don't know. The result was you get it.
You know how it started. Some old hat who really knew what they were doing told some young guy with a skinny face like me, "Hey, get that scope as low as you can get it." Didn't explain why, and then that kid went on and he was telling his buddies, "Hey, look, here's the deal. I don't know why, but you're gonna want to get that scope as low as possible." And then everyone's like, "Oh, okay, there's got to be something to this."
But working our way up, we can hit the action. So a lot of people, they talk about bolt throw, different type of lugs. If I have 2 lugs, it's maybe like a 90-degree bolt throw. 3 lugs, maybe it's like in the 70s. It doesn't really matter, right? So whatever your personal preference is, but I would like an action that's very smooth. All right, does not bind up. And then preferably something that's been blueprinted or trued up. All right, so all of those surfaces, they don't have any play, they don't have any slop. Everything is machined to a little bit tighter of a tolerance.
Okay, gotcha. And why? And what is all that doing?
Consistency. So once we kind of true it up and things like that, it's going to add a little bit more consistency. And how they, how that bolt operates. When you do that, they tend to bind a little bit less. They're going to be a little bit more smoother. Bolt lift is going to be a little bit easier too, because again, all those surfaces are kind of married up a little bit. Like I said, a little bit tighter tolerances.
It is. When you're behind a gun with a smooth bolt, life's better.
That is true.
It is actually true though, because if you're trying to be consistent and you have a gun with a sticky bolt, you guys have had this before, right? And I'm not talking sticky bolt okay, we've got an overcharged cartridge or something like that. I'm talking it's just sticky. You have to come off the gun and you have to kind of get it going and pull it back. And then by the time you finally get yourself settled again, that takes a lot of time. Yeah. So
I feel like it even just disrupts your thought. Instead of focusing on what you're trying to focus on, you're that's binding up, or then you're you're kind of taken out of where you want to be mentally.
Yep. And then some people also kind of get into the weeds when they talk about blueprinted or trued up action, when they talk about, the jump of the bullet's going to be a little bit more consistent, or the chamber pressure. Like, they get into the weeds and they kind of go down different little rabbit holes. So, but case in point, it's like, yeah, absolutely, that operation's nice and smooth and buttery, not binding up.
Like this gun, you can do it without even having your shoulder on the stock, which is so nice.
Yeah,
like there's guns where you're like, if it was like this, you'd lift the whole thing up just trying to.
But yeah, so again, personal preference on the action, just kind of meeting those criteria points, kind of working our way up. A trigger. I don't care if someone has like a 1 pound trigger, a half a pound trigger, or a 3.5 pound trigger. Doesn't really matter, right? Personal preference. But what I do want that trigger to do is break like a glass rod, right? So when I do apply, say, that half a pound of pressure, it breaks, or those 4 pounds of pressure, it breaks. No creep, no mush, nothing. Mm-hmm. Right? So again, single stage, 2-stage, personal preference, but when I want it to break, I want it to break consistently with the same amount of pressure every single time.
Yeah.
So.
Gotcha.
Yep.
I mean, that really, I remember growing up, you'd hear people like, oh man, this thing's got a great trigger. And I was like, whatever, dude. Like, a trigger's a trigger.
Same.
Just like,
Same.
Squeeze
Shoot the
it.
gun.
That's back. Exactly. Like, nerd. That's back when we'd say squeeze a trigger. Just squeeze it. It's going to go off. Let's go. Now we say press.
To the point that saying pull the trigger is like a swear word.
Yeah.
Just
it's like that'd be like saying fishing pole. They're fishing rods, Jim. Okay.
Or like saying you're gonna stick your clip in your gun or something like that.
You say pull the trigger. Gosh dang it.
So when I was little, it's kind of funny. We were talking about how things evolve over time. Growing up, it was a clip. Right?
Yeah.
Like around hunting, like, every November here in Wisconsin, all the family gets together and it's a clip. Funny how things
like, we know what you're talking. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Let's move on.
It's yeah. Semantics. So I do have some rifles at home, more for like the nostalgia thing that they're still around. They have like a 7.5 pound trigger and just not break anywhere close to like that glass rod we were talking about.
And is that what you take to your?
It'll more like bends. So, so that's kind of what we look for in a trigger, and then barrels. So if I was to do a couple things to quote unquote accurize my rifle, the places I would start would be that trigger and that barrel.
Okay.
Probably trigger first, then barrel. And then I'll probably true up that action like one of the it's lower on the totem pole.
Okay.
For me as an individual. The barrel, like we talked about, kind of application based. If we're talking about consistency with precision at long ranges, all right, then we want a heavy contour barrel. Contour is kind of the shape and dimensions of that barrel. So we want a really stout, heavy barrel. All right. When we have a heavier barrel, we add rigidity to it. When we add rigidity, all right, it's going to be consistent, a little bit more consistent from shot to shot. When we increase that contour, we also increase the surface area. If we increase the surface area, it's going to cool down a little bit faster, et cetera, et cetera. So,
or heat up slower.
Yeah, heat up slower. Yep, absolutely. Conversely, someone says, "Oh, I have this hunting rifle, right? It's a sporter, like really featherweight, like profile barrel." Not saying they can't be accurate. Absolutely, you can put 3 rounds in the same hole, but you might not be able to do it with 20 rounds.
Right.
So,
well, and also, shootability wise, like shooting 1 to 3 rounds is very different than shooting 20 rounds. I mean, that goes into even like cartridge selection, but shooting, which I do all too often, Jim, shoot a lightweight Magnum cartridge, like it's not super fun. In fact, when I was getting ready for this last hunt, and then Ryan and I have been doing, we did that whole thing on the 308, and I was like, could everything or most things that I'm doing be accomplished with a 308 or 6.5 Creed? Am I? And then, I don't know.
Do you have, kind of getting to my next point, Jimmy has a suppressor on his rifle. With that Magnum do you have a muzzle brake on it?
No, Yeah.
So big component of a muzzle brake. We want some of that recoil to be absorbed, kind of deflected, and reduced. However we can. All right. So, and Jimmy has a suppressor on here. So
I'm pretty sure at this point Mark craves it.
It's just the punishment.
He likes
glutton
it.
for punishment.
Yeah, I'm into that sort of thing.
I think you are. I think
it
you are.
It hurts so good, Jim. No, well, and case in point though, well, actually, so Eric, he's going on a bear hunt here in a week or so. No, he leaves tomorrow, actually. But he's got a 300 Win Mag, the lesser of the 300s, but it has a brake on it, and it really is astonishing comparatively, like with and without. It's like it does make a big difference.
When you were shooting that bear, did it stay in your field of view throughout the shot process?
I mean, when I picked my head up and saw it careening down the hill, yeah. It was in my field of view.
So staying on the
Correct
gun's pretty
answer.
important, right? So watching the reaction of that animal. Did we hit the animal? Where did we hit it? Did we miss? Where did we miss? Things like that. So hunting applications, competition, it can be applied, across the board. So recoil management is pretty paramount, not just in the competition. Obviously, we achieve that by, making these guns, upwards, high 20s, maybe around 30 pounds, right? Not ideal. Obviously for hunting situations, but in hunting situations, maybe we'd go ahead and put that brake or something like that on there. So
Yeah,
It's trade-offs.
yeah,
it's trade-offs, right? And that is, where I go, because I'm like, I want to extend my effective range, but one of the ways you can do that is with like you at least from also like taking into consideration like terminal performance, right? Because we are trying to kill something very efficiently. So sometimes bigger can be better, but in the same breath, though, like you said, if you're trying to like watch your shot, call your shot, see how that animal reacted, particularly by yourself, right? Going down in, at least, like recoil can be like a huge asset. And so that's where, a lot of these competition guys for that reason are selecting cartridges like 6 ARC or 6.5 Creed or whatever, because of all those things that you just mentioned. So from hunting, I guess where I'm going, you may want to strike a balance, because I don't want to carry a 20-pound gun.
Yeah. Well, and there's, absolutely. Staying in the scope is so important, and there's a lot of people who, even when they're not shooting at a live animal, they're shooting at steel that will remain standing there for sure after you hit it. There's a lot of people who shoot and then want to look up, and it's kind of funny because the reason that you're in the scope, aside from it also giving you a reticle with which to aim, is to see the target better. It's magnified. And so, if you shoot and you want to see that target afterwards, like instead of popping up and then going back to 1x, like why not stay in at 8x or 10x or whatever? I think sometimes, depending on some certain hunting scenarios, it can be nice to just come out of the scope. But still, I mean, you never know. Like, you never know if you're going to need that follow-up shot or whatever, and you want to be able to then, again, find it in the scope with the crosshairs.
absolutely.
What are your thoughts on cartridge selection for long range, Justin?
For long range, so my competition rifle is a little bit different. I chose, one, not to reload. So when I don't reload, I'm kind of married to a couple different cartridges. So maybe like the 6mm, so like 6 Creedmoor or the 6.5 Creedmoor. For whatever reason, shooting a 108 grain bullet just kind of weirds me out a little bit. So I chose the the 6.5. So we're gonna have a little bit higher of a recoil impulse, but and what we kind of lose is a little bit of that muzzle velocity. All right, so maybe not as like a flatter trajectory, so it might not be as forgiving on smaller targets, distance dependent, things like that. But what am I going to get with the 6.5 versus some of those other rounds? A little bit longer barrel life. I don't have to reload. Not only that, but because, all right, I am carrying that heavier projectile, I may be able to see hits on steel a little bit better.
Sure.
So with those further distances, with those smaller projectiles, I may not see where I hit on the steel or which way that steel swings. So if I'm able to stay in the scope like we talked about, and I see that steel swing a certain way, I'll be like, okay, if it swings like this way, maybe I hit it on that edge type of thing, right? With those smaller cartridges, it may not go ahead and have enough oomph to get a little bit of swing. Or if I miss, maybe it doesn't have enough to go ahead and have the signature kicking up the dirt or what have you.
Okay.
So those are some of the reasons why I chose like the 6.5.
Can you explain what's wrong with 108? Is it the number?
No,
you just don't like the number?
No, it's an itty bitty bullet.
Oh, it is pretty small.
Yeah, but and that's kind of why it creeps me out. But just because, like, when we were in the military, it was like, oh, you got to shoot a 300 Win Mag with like 190 grain plus bullet. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that'll pull it down.
Or like to like Mark's point, like if I'm hunting, like I can't shoot this animal with a 108 grain bullet. It's just So that weird kind of, I guess, I don't know, stigmatism about it. But nothing absolutely is wrong with it. A lot of competitions have been won, you know what I mean, with that.
I didn't know
I
if
can
it was
tell you
just
when
something about it.
when I was
It's like, well, I just bought like 1,000 rounds.
When I was
absolutely
getting
not.
when I was getting that rifle, that the old 300 wasn't sorted out. Went through a couple boxes of ammo. The thought crossed, I wonder if I can kill stuff with 108 grain. And I think you can. I mean, I brought this example up many times before, but I had a buddy who was shooting a 6XC and just absolutely stomping big black bears and other stuff with it. And like, I don't know. It wasn't doing the trick.
Yeah.
So.
It can happen to you.
So, but again, perception's reality. So what works for one person, what doesn't work for that one person, maybe completely the opposite for somebody else.
Whatever instills confidence in you is important, you know.
But yeah, so that's kind of what we look for in a rifle. Optic is very similar. Again, we don't care if it's mil, MOA, doesn't matter the magnification range. A couple things we kind of look for would be like a technical reticle. Because we can get a lot of information using a technical reticle. A lot of people are kind of weirded by it, kind of a little off-putting because it looks very complicated. There's only maybe like 2-3 features. Everything else is just like a redundancies built in, right? Like a grid system. So a technical reticle, adjustable parallax is pretty key, right? Because you don't want that fixed 100-yard parallax when you're trying to shoot a 1,000-yard target, right? And then a solid zero stop. Right, rev stop, zero stop. We want to know where our zero is at. All right, we don't want to get lost in those revolutions because it's pretty easy to do. And exposed turrets, I want to be able to dial. So, other than that, having those larger tube diameters might be nice because good rule of thumb, larger tube diameter, more elevation, things like that. But again, magnification doesn't really matter, whatever personal preference is. Objective lens, if you want to go big, go big. If you want to go a little bit smaller, go smaller. Again, application based, depending on your lighting conditions and things like that. So, but yeah, those are some of the key points we kind of look at. Technical reticle, turrets are a big one, adjustable parallax, things like that. So, and a good, solid zero stop, rev stop, what have you.
The zeros, I'm just going to let all my skeletons out of the closet today, Jim. I one time missed an absolutely giant aoudad because you're not going to believe this. I was doing stuff a little bit last minute and trying to get rifles sorted out. Eventually decided I'm going to go with my 6.5 Creed Browning, and I had an HSLR.
Good scope.
And
good gun. I remember the 6.5 Browning.
I didn't put the shims in, and then when I think I got distracted, you might also know this. I can get distracted. Like if somebody comes up and talks to me, I got a good zero, and then must have spun my turret to zero, and then then the person talked to me, and then I pushed it another entire rev low. And yeah, it was like first day of the hunt. And
Did you just watch dirt splash up like right in front of your gun?
So once again, we were videoing. it.
I'm so low.
And
atmospheric.
It's like a 200-yard shot. And the ram, like he was like walking, but like it wasn't anything that was like out of the question. And I'm just like, let's go. I'm like, boom. He's like, you missed, way low. And I'm just like, what the heck? And I think I ended up not getting another shot because he went down in this dip, and then he was,
I'm
he's off to the races.
At a full rev low that you didn't just skip one into it.
So then we watched the video back, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? I can't, I'm not above missing, but like this is like dramatic. Like this is like, that's 24 MOA low. And so we get back, and I'm like, I shoot, and I'm like not even on paper, and I'm like, and I just go, I wonder what would happen if I come up an entire revolution, boom, like right in the zero. And then like we watch the video back, I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly 24 MOA. Like it's like right in line. The bullet splash is right in line with his front leg. I'm like, oh my, dude, it was like a 30+ inch ram. Like it was like absolute giant. Gosh. So anyway, case in point, lesson learned. Zero stop is important. So
you can always use the bottom stop that I did at the Vortex Extreme when I lost where my zero was.
Yeah, I don't recommend that.
I knew that I had 2.5 revolutions before I just ran out of elevation.
Okay.
And so I just decided I don't have my zero stop installed, so I'll just dial until I get all out of elevation, and then I'll go back 2.5 revs from there. And whatever is the nearest zero I'll just assume that's my zero. And I finished. That was halfway through the competition. I finished the rest of the competition on that zero, and it worked.
They call that's like an organic zero stop.
That's just the built-in one that everybody's always had and never used.
But case in point, knowing your equipment. Had you not known that, you'd kind of would have been a little screwed.
Yeah, getting stuff with turrets that are made to dial. Like, back in the day, like we were talking about people who had turrets where it was like, don't touch that. Can you imagine if I was like, oh yeah, I just bottomed out my turret and then I went back 2.5 revs and that zero and I kept going. People would be like, but yeah, I mean, it was made to dial, so it just handled it just fine.
Nice.
What do you like in a reticle?
As far as like, what are the the subtension features and things like that?
What are the subtension features and which ones are you using most? Which ones do you find you using?
So, right off the bat, we'll just talk about MOA versus mils. Well, not in detail. I'm just going to get in mils. If you want to bring that up later, we can absolutely do that. But I'm a mil reticle guy.
Okay.
So
I think that covers it.
That's the first thing.
That's all you need to know.
That's the first thing I'm going to look at. And then something that is simple, but yet has a lot of the features I look for. So when it comes to windage and things like that, I like my windage subtensions to be graduated no more than 0.2 mils.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me personally. Reason being is because when I do hold for wind, I want to be able to kind of refine that just a little bit. I define point in my reticle where I have to kind of place that on the target versus kind of going in no man's land. All right. But again,
you're talking about a point where the target is covered by the center crosshair instead of it being like just an open
center. Or wherever that subtension is left or right of my center reticle on the horizontal stadia line. Yeah. So, but again, personal preference. If you have 0.2 mil increments, you pretty easy to decipher, halfway in between. Same thing with if you have 0.5 mil increments. Now you kind of have like 0.25 because it's pretty easy to decipher somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's like using a ruler. Like if you have one of those simple rulers you had in school that just show like quarters of an inch.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, I need an eighth, so I'm just going to guess.
Yeah.
But then when you get one of those precise rulers that shows that all the way down to like 16ths or 30 seconds, and you're like, oh, now I can get exactly in that spot.
Exactly. I'm more of maybe an eighth guy, maybe not so much a 16th guy when it comes to like the refinement of my subtensions inside the reticle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I look for. With maybe the horizontal stadia line. Depending on your application, some people like the 0.1 mil increments. Some of our optics, some of the reticles, we have that option, but it's just further out, so it's not cluttering up the center of your field of view, which is nice. All right, a lot of different uses we can use with the reticle, measuring things, using the reverse math, finding out distances to those objects, and then kind of like a Christmas tree style. Right, so it's kind of graduated down. The reason being, the further out we get with remaining velocity, wind, things like that, it's going to have a greater effect the further out we get. So I kind of like those reference points to be graduated out. So I do have a little bit more information regarding misses, all right, at distance.
Gotcha.
And it doesn't need to be anything crazy. Those can be graduated out in 0.2 mil increments, for example, half mil increments. And then as far as like elevation holds or subtensions, if you will, half mils are fine.
Mm-hmm.
Again, kind of application based. So anything on my horizontal stadia line, I like 0.2. Anything on my vertical stadia line, personally, I like about 0.5.
Gotcha.
Because you're usually dialing your elevation, right? I mean, the holds that come into play are maybe... I mean, do you use your vertical stadia for holds or so much as you do just like, spotting or maybe a correction?
Spotting, corrections, and things like that. The longer I've kind of been out of what I used to do, the less and less I'll hold for elevation.
Okay.
It's just, the time really isn't, like, the Mongolian horde's not coming at you. You don't have to engage, target 100 yards all the way out to 1,000 yards, and you don't have to do it in quick succession, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if I was, in the middle of a prairie dog village or something like that. And
they're charging.
Yeah.
The prairie dog horde.
Yeah. But for me, my application, I'm really not holding a whole lot for elevation anymore. I will, obviously, with some competition, so some PRS stages, I'll go ahead and hold. I may dial on a certain, I guess, elevation for a specific yardage, and then just hold from there.
Yeah.
So if I have a target array of like, I don't know, maybe 300 all the way out to like 1,000, maybe I'll dial on one of those ranges and I'll just maybe hold up from there, or maybe I'll hold under, and I'll kind of use maybe a combination thereof. So.
Okay.
Going back to using the reticle to spot misses or hits, right?
Yeah.
You might find that you want to, measure like, maybe it was a hit, but maybe it was, the left edge of the plate or whatever. I want to measure what that is. That also goes back into staying in the gun, though.
Yeah.
And so, like, having the
Absolutely.
gun set up,
Yes,
that it
it
fits
does.
you. Maybe it's a little bit heavier. Maybe you've got some sort of, like we talked about, a brake or suppressor on it. Maybe shooting, a lighter or like a cartridge that has less recoil, stuff like that. So
Absolutely. But yeah, so that's kind of what I look for. I do, like I said earlier, I do hold for elevation, but the only really time I'm using holds nowadays would be in a PRS match. Hunting applications, pretty minimal. If I can dial, even in a hunting situation, I'm going to dial.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what getting back or transitioning to, and maybe we can kind of wrap with this side of the house, like just talking about like what it takes to execute like a good shot that will be a good shot, either close or at distance. Talking about stability in multiple positions, maybe a few ways that you're gaining stability, and then also just like your process from your shooting process to make sure that you're like breaking a good shot that's gonna hit where you want it to go.
Absolutely. So when it comes to that kind of position, trying to achieve three things. Trying to achieve our natural point of aim. We do so by muscular relaxation. We achieve that by skeletal structure. So those kind of three things we look for in a good shooting position. If you have none, if you don't have one of those, you have none of them, right?
Okay, gotcha.
So natural point of aim is king, right?
Okay.
Because that's where that gun is going to want to lie in relation to that target naturally, right? With no muscular input. So if you're forcing that position, right, you're forcing that, right, you're going to be off a little. You can potentially be a little bit off regarding your point of impact.
Is it because you're just providing input in the rifle to get to where? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a matter of, like, I remember when I first heard people talk about natural point of aim, I thought it was something that I couldn't change. It is something that you can change by building a position that causes your natural point of aim to be at the target. Absolutely. And so it's not just like something that you were born with, and it's like, well, I guess your natural point of aim hangs a little left. Guys, anyone? But...
Oh, I'm tracking.
Did you get that, Mark? Well, see, the joke was anyway. But
Jim and I always like to joke that when somebody has to explain why the joke is funny, it likely just wasn't funny.
Likely, which I've grown used to.
When you're adjusting like that cheek riser to get, is that like that's assisting in your natural point of aim? Right?
Absolutely, that can aid into it.
Putting a bag under the rear part of your stock will help adjust your natural point of aim. Because like if this rifle doesn't have a bag under it and you get behind it and then you have to be holding the stock of the gun up to aim at the target, that's immediately doing like Justin's talking about. You're inducing muscle tension, which relates and eventually becomes muscle fatigue to get the target or the gun on target. So you're building a position such that when you're in your most relaxed state, which you can hold forever, when you're at your most relaxed state, the gun just wants to be on the target.
Gotcha.
And that goes across the board. So I'm trying to achieve like those three things, regardless if I'm shooting off the prone, if I'm shooting off of a barricade. Granted, right, it's not going to be as ideal than say I was in a perfect ideal position like the prone or something like that. But even in a hunting situation, right, if I come up to like, I don't know, a log pile or what have you, I'm trying to achieve some of those things, right? I want to rely on some of the the barricade or the obstacle, right, to kind of build in not only the gun's shooting platform, but my own as well. So, for example, if I'm kind of crouched down, I don't want to hold my body up with a lot of muscular tension, so I may utilize that log, that boulder, all right, to kind of help stabilize my body, all right, and that's going to help stabilize the gun type of thing. So, like I said, it doesn't really matter what position I'm in. I'm kind of trying to achieve those three things. So,
what about a question I have, and I kind of go back and forth a little bit, but like, what are your thoughts on like almost like free recoil versus like just really just like driving the rifle?
Free Reezy, baby.
So when you come off the gun, right? So for example, anytime you mount the gun, right? You get that gun in your shoulder pocket, good rifle shoulder connection, and you come into contact with it, you're connected with it, you're inducing like movement, right? Your body's moving. Just sitting here, we're breathing, all right? Muscles are kind of going ahead, they're firing and things like that. So if you were to come off the gun, now it's an inanimate object with very little input, right? So that reticle, your wobble zone on target is going to be a lot less. So in theory, if you're just going to go ahead and press that trigger, all right, essentially, right, that bullet should go where that reticle's pointed, right? All things being perfect. The problem is, do we know we hit that target, where we hit that target? Now we have to get back on target, recover on that target, right, re-index. So that's where things kind of, there's a big give and take. So if it was just one shot and I had someone to spot for me, all right, then yeah, all right, if accuracy was paramount, and if I got on the gun, I was just inducing way too much movement, all right? But again, we have to think about the application, all right, and then the give and take there. So that would be one pro, right? Cons, a lot of cons there, right? Now we maybe one shot didn't do it. We have to kind of go ahead and re-index on target. So that's going to take some time. Not only that, but we didn't spot the round, so now we have to talk to our spotter. If we do have a spotter, they're going to have to talk us on, so a lot of stuff that goes into that. So versus trying to work with our position and then help minimize the wobble zone regarding adjusting our position, kind of like Jimmy was talking about, whether it's a bag, cheek riser, things like that to aid in the stability.
I mean, you can really use, I guess I think of oftentimes, but like people who do like a precision rifle match, they carry a lot of things with them to help mitigate that. When I hunt in the field, I'll utilize what I have at hand, whether it's something, an environmental thing, or, like I'm grabbing like my puffy jacket that's in a stuff sack and using that as like a rear bag or something like that. But
TP roll.
Yeah.
I actually mean that too. I'm not kidding.
Really?
Yeah. I've done it.
I don't carry a whole roll.
You don't?
No.
It's not that heavy.
It's not. You're right. Actually, it isn't. I probably should. Then wouldn't stress out.
Just a thought.
Might have more socks.
Do I want to use that?
TP roll or white chocolate chip macadamia nut Cliff Bar?
TP roll.
Not the Cliff Bar wasn't for wiping, it was just for plugging.
Oh,
I
see. Gotcha.
But it's kind of talking about when like things and how things evolved. I remember when like pump pillows, shooting bags kind of first entered and hit the like the market or the industry, became really big in the sport. You might see a competitor out there with like 2, 3, 4 different bags hitting a stage, and now you're seeing like the top level shooters just going out there and running a stage with like one bag.
Yeah.
Okay.
Versus when it first started.
Does seem, we really streamlined it down to kind of like what's most important.
Yep.
But and now they make some of those bags that are really like they have a lighter weight fill that some people will carry in their pack if they're feeling that that's absolutely necessary. It is, so when you shoot with a bag, once you've done it once, it's very eye opening. It's like, what have I been doing?
Like, I may pack this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I took when we did deer camp. Now, granted, we weren't hiking in very far. And we were in some
basically
gentlemen's deer blinds, but
back 40.
I took a bag.
Those blinds were so nice. I felt guilty sitting in it
a little bit. But
we were hiking so little that I packed in like, what is that? What's the bag that I packed in?
The big one.
I mean,
did you work up a sweat going to this?
It is a bag of sand, man. It's heavy. It was probably like 5 pounds.
The game changer bag.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Did you end up using it?
I did. Yeah. I put it over the window of the blind.
How'd it work?
I don't want to talk about
Mark had some other things going on. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to let all the skeletons out. I missed. Okay, there we go. There, it's out there.
Mark does hit animals.
I did. I made a perfect shot just 2 weeks ago. Let's see. Hold on. I'm going through my list here. I just want to, we talked about that. Okay. We can't leave any long-range discussion without talking about the wind a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about reading wind.
You may have to start this with Justin, and I'm going to have to run to my meeting. But that's okay if I randomly disappear. Everyone.
So we'll end with this, Jim, and I'll try not to get too windy.
Ooh, he's good.
Let's talk about reading wind, maybe with a kestrel, and then also using environmental factors to make that assessment.
So reading wind, a lot of people call it one big ass guess, but we can have a well-educated guess. All right, so we do things by reading the wind and things like that at our location and at the target's location. So you mentioned reading the wind using environmental factors. Let's talk about the kestrel first. Kestrels are great, but they give us a very small picture regarding what's going on, right? So for example, when I have a kestrel or any wind meter for that matter, I have what the wind is doing at my location. All right, which is good because at least I have a baseline. I can look around, see what the vegetation is doing. All right, so those environmental factors you were talking about, right? I have the same vegetation at my location versus what's happening, 2/3 of the way or that last third to the target. So I can go ahead and use this as a baseline and then go from there. So that's kind of why it's really good to have a wind meter, because you can get a baseline. Wind matters everywhere. At your location, 2/3 of the way to the middle third and that last third, right? So it matters everywhere. A lot of people think, the remaining velocity is going to be slower at distance, that last third, so that's where it matters more. The middle third, people may say, it matters there the most because that's max ord, right? The max ordinate's the highest point in my trajectory, so wind at elevation is going to be a little bit faster, things like that, so that's why it matters. Some people say the first third is because if there's no wind down at the target, but there's wind at my location, that bullet's already on that deflected path, and it's never going to come back to center.
Or I've heard the argument that the first third is most important because it's the one you can actually get accurately.
Yeah, there we go.
So if you're going to get one, why not just use the one that you can actually get accurately with a kestrel or something like that?
But it is one big guess.
Correct.
Yeah. But wind matters everywhere. The kestrel is nice. The wind meter is nice because we at least have a baseline of what the wind is doing, and we can use that to kind of judge what's going on at distance. So you can read wind by, natural indicators such as grass, vegetation, things like that. I hate to say it, but Mylar balloons, plastic bags, or just garbage in general, it's almost everywhere out there. So I was on an antelope hunt out in Wyoming, pronghorn, whatever you want to call them. And there was a bag, a grocery bag, just kind of dancing along. I'm okay, I'll use that because out there the vegetation's a lot different.
Right.
20 miles an hour here, that grass, those trees are just bending over. Out there, it's
a little stiffer.
Just like the sage is just sitting there. You're I can feel the wind, but I can't.
Yeah. So any indicators like that. But again, just know what the wind is doing based on your geographical location. So we kind of touched on that with, sagebrush and here in the Midwest.
Right.
So that's kind of what we're looking for. And then we'll use maybe a felt on face method. So for example, wind blowing at this speed is going to do this. So 1 to 3 miles an hour, smoke may start to drift, et cetera, and we build up. However, once you kind of hit a point of 12, 15 miles an hour of wind, anything really past that's very hard to judge. All right. Is that a 20 mile an hour wind or a 25 mile an hour wind? Well, if you're off plus or minus, 5 miles an hour of wind and you're trying to shoot a 1,000-yard target, all right, say it's 0 miles an hour wind or 5 miles an hour wind, even if you have a 20-inch wide target at 1,000 yards, if you're off plus or minus 5 miles per hour, you're missing that target.
Right.
Yeah.
So pretty important. But like I said, anything really past that, very hard to judge wind, kind of by eye and things like that.
So yeah, before Jim had to go, unfortunately, apparently he had some work to do. Just talking about wind, and you're talking about it's over 25 miles an hour, 50, 20, and it just becomes
too difficult to at least judge accurately.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. There's a lot of elite wind callers out there. There's a lot of competitions where you may have individuals for that team, and their sole job is just calling winds.
Gotcha. Wow.
All right. So it's that important.
It's critical, and it just seems like it's always notoriously like the hardest part of shooting long range.
Everything we've talked about up to this point have been constants. We can account for them. Everything from like even spin drift and some of those secondary effects, the atmosphere, right? We can account for that. Wind is more of like the art department, I guess, instead of the science department. Wind is forever changing, and because of that, it is the number one reason for misses at distance.
Yep.
By far, right? So if people are like, man, nope, my gun is good, I'm missing, it's probably 99 times out of 100 because of the wind. So
well, and it's just like you said, it's tough to count for. It can be ever changing. It can change every second. I'm sure I know I've been, and I've shoot a lot less long range than you, but you've got a target at distance, and you're like, oh, that shot, everything was perfect, and I missed, just off the left edge. So then you account for that with your hold, and then you miss just off the other side, and you're like, whoa, like that was just a few seconds, you know, and you'll hear guys say, they'll try and do like a fast follow, so they are taking advantage of like, yep, that, if I can follow up really fast, it's going to be like that same wind call, and like, but I've been like, okay, cool, get settled again, maybe 5 seconds, and you're like,
absolutely,
and it's like that's enough to.
That's completely different,
and you'll see that too. I mean, one of the one interesting visual thing I've seen is like when you have flags at a long range, and you're like, you can see like at 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you got flags just doing,
absolutely,
all sorts of different things. That's like, oh my goodness, like how do you account for that?
Well, we talked about those environmental factors, reading wind, not only with, I guess, vegetation and things like that, but also mirage. Right, so mirage, you can get indicators regarding wind speed, wind direction, things like that. So, reading mirage alone. So,
I think we might have to do another podcast just on wind, Justin.
Yeah, like I said, by far the biggest reason for misses at distance. But like I said, the reason but then again, knowing the value or the wind speed, that's only part of calling wind. Now we need to know how we apply that,
right,
based on our wind formulas.
Oh my gosh. We're going to do another podcast on. We've done one in the past. We're going to do another podcast on when. Justin, we lost Jim.
Yeah.
Maybe I did get a little too windy there. Hopefully we didn't lose the listeners. Guys, let us know. Hopefully you found some of this stuff helpful. I know we kind of went back and forth like the wind, Justin. But man, just the long range stuff. It is so fun. It's fascinating. It's just, we have all these tools at our disposal to get better and better at it, and it's cool to see what you guys are doing as far as like adopting new things, and man, there's always something to learn.
It'll be interesting to see where the industry is 5 years from now.
My goodness, who could guess? So, all right, everybody, thanks everybody for listening. If you want to hear more long range stuff, if you want to hear another podcast on wind, let us know that in the comments below. Until next time, Justin, thank you. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.